Hello, I'm Walt Jurek. Thank you for joining us at Community on Demand. Today, Dan continues his series of 7 sermons he has titled, The 7 Habits of Highly Ineffective People. Today's sermon, the 5th in the series, is titled, The Habit of Promoting Fear Over Faith. Dan pulls from the text of the book of Numbers, chapters 13 and 14, to help us see how fear-mongering is dangerous and how voices of bold faith exhibit true leadership that can help us overcome fear and accomplish our vision. This message was recorded during a live Sunday morning service at Community. Let's listen in as Dan begins.
You know, over the past 100 years or so, our country has gone through some frightening experiences. For instance, on October the 28th, 1929, the stock market crashed, sending our country, the world, into what was called the Great Depression. And it looked hopeless. It looked like the end of all things. And that's when FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, had his famous inaugural address where he said these words that have been repeated thousands and thousands of times to rally people out of that time. He said, you remember what he said? The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And that rallied people. We can do this. We can pull back out of this thing and move on. And he did. 8 years later, another frightening experience when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Imperial Japanese forces and destroyed our armada. And again, FDR says these words. It is December following the attack. He says, no matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through absolute victory. And it rallied our nation. Everybody unified, moved together, and brought us to victory through that horrible time. And then I remember on November of 1961, Nikita Khrushchev began a Cuban missile site buildup in 90 miles from the border of Florida in preparation to set up an entire missile compound. And we begin in our elementary classes, junior high classes, we begin to do nuclear attack exercises where we ran and ducked under the desk. Like it's really going to help, you know. And JFK during that time stood before the people and he said this: let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty. We even went so far to fire a shot over the bow of a Russian ship and call the bluff. And Nikita began to withdraw his with that naval blockade. Many of you are old enough, I can see out there, to remember those days. And more recently, following the World Trade Center attack of 9/11, G.W. Bush goes to ground zero, picks up a megaphone, stands with his arm around first responders, and he cries out, I can hear you. The whole world hears you. And those people who knock down these buildings will be able to hear from all of us soon. And once again, we rallied in faith, we responded, we we pulled back together, and guess what our fight song was during that time? It was, for him, where there is faith, people fill the churches. And we responded. And we pulled back together as a nation. As I said, our country has gone through some frightening experiences, and we've had some pretty good leadership in people like FDR, JFK, and G.W. Bush that have brought us to a point of rallying and pulled us together and encouraged us as a nation that we can survive, we can preserve liberty, we can move back together. However, it seems like recently these things have changed. In the face of crisis, it just seems that rather than rallying people, by people who call themselves leaders, it seems that we are beginning to cower more and lead less. In recent times, we've seen, Uvalde, Ukraine, COVID, and what we do, we don't know what to do. We back down, we criticize, but we are not pulling together in faith and moving forward. Unfortunately, I find myself from time to time listening to voices of fear as opposed to voices of faith. I find myself at the beginning of the COVID crisis, for instance, I found myself glued to the television screen watching the COVID counter and afraid that the COVID death angel was going to come through the door and get us, And I sometimes begin to lose hope, and I begin to think about all of the things that we're struggling as a nation. I think about the soaring crime in Houston. I think about inflation. I think about shortages. I think about the incompetent leadership that seems to be everywhere. I think about the safety of our children, as we all do. I stand at the door, you're praying for our kids as they come in, and I begin to worry. Now, don't get me wrong. We have cause to be concerned because things are not getting better in the world. They're getting worse. But we have some giant problems that we're facing. The president got up and said the other day, he said, "Get ready, we are going to face food shortages." In another speech, he said, the high gas prices that we have are a tough time and a period of transition. I'm thinking, transition to what? Higher gas prices. That's defeatism. It causes concern, and it causes me to think, where are we? Is there faith? Where are we as a people? What do we do? And there are really two ways that we can respond to the giant problems that we face as a country, as we face as a community, the giant problems that we face in our homes. I haven't even started mentioning things there, but we're facing problems, and there's two ways that we can respond today. Here they are. Number one, we can become leaders of bold faith, or number two, we can develop the habit of promoting and cowering in fear over faith. Now, I want to say all that because when we go back to our text in the book of Exodus and Numbers, we find the nation of Israel on their Exodus journey. They're journeying from Egypt to Canaan, and they are going to face some giant problems that cause them to tremble in fear, and they needed leadership. They needed leadership to pull them out and help them to move forward. Let's go to Numbers chapter 13 and just get an introductory passage right there. In Numbers chapter 13, verse 1, it says this, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers, you shall send a man, every one a leader among them. For several weeks we've been talking about the children of Israel and some of the things that they faced as they were moving through the wilderness. This has been 1 year since they left Egypt. They're standing at the border of the land of Canaan, ready to go in. And Moses called them together. God said to Moses, call them together and send a leadership team in on a reconnaissance mission. They need to go in, they need to look things over, and come back and give a report. That is what they were to do. And these 12 leaders went into the land on the recon mission. They made an assessment, and when they returned, rather than saying, okay, Moses, we've got this, let's go in, they did 3 things. Here's what they did. Number 1, they saw a problem. Number 2, they scared the people. And number 3, they stopped the progress. That usually is the norm for poor leadership. So let's just kind of see how they did that. First of all, they saw a problem. Look in verse 27, Numbers 13, verse 27. I'm going to read a little lengthy passage of scripture here as we get kicked off here. We went to the land. Now, these are the spies that came back to give their report. And here's what some of them said. We went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey. And this is its fruit. There's a couple of them had like a cluster of grapes on a spear that they were bringing across. This is some of their fruit right here. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwelt in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwelt by the sea along the banks of the Jordan. During their recon mission, they saw some things. They saw strong people, fortified cities, and descendants of Anak. This word Anak is a very interesting word when you look it up. It simply means long-necked people. That's what it means. And it was used to describe what would later be called giants in the land of Canaan. Let me pause here. When I think about tall people, I know what you're thinking about. You're thinking about Kyle over here, aren't you? Every one of you, okay? Kyle, stand up and then sit back down. All right. All right, now sit back down. All right. We've actually seen some pretty tall people and during our time. In fact, let me just call out a few here. You might realize some of these. Shaquille O'Neal, Shaq. Do you realize that he stood 7'1", which is taller than you, okay, and weighed 325 pounds, played for the Boston Celtics. And then for us old guys, there was Wilt Chamberlain. Do you remember him, guys? You remember Wilt? So, and some of you young people too, Wilt. He stood, he stood 7'1", weighed 275 pounds, played for Golden State. And then we had our own Yao Ming. Yao Ming, 7'6", 311 pounds, played for the Rockets. But the tallest man ever on record lived right here in the United States in the area of St. Louis. His name was Robert Waldo, and he was 8'1", 439 pounds, living up near St. Louis. Pretty tall. So there are tall people around, you know. According to medical journals that I read this, I want to know what makes people tall. You know, I really want to know. And about 80% of what makes a person tall is about 600 different combinations of chromosomes in their DNA. In fact, it's very hard for them to figure it all out and replicate that. But 80% of it is in their DNA. And that's exactly what the children of Israel were getting at here when they said, we see the descendants of Anak in the land. These people have it in their DNA, many of them, to be taller than what we are. That is what they were saying. And that's what the recon team was reporting. So they were reporting this. They said, we've got some good news and we've got some bad news. The good news is, yes, Moses, you're right. This is a great place. I mean, the land is flowing. I mean, you should see it. There's some bad news. There are a few tall people here, fortified cities, and it's going to be a tough sell. And to be honest with you, it didn't really affect the people very much. And they thought, well, okay, good report. But when they did not respond the way that these leaders wanted them to respond, they took a second step and they began to incite fear. They began to scare the people. Read on. 13:31. But the men, the recon team, said, we are not able to go up against these people, for they are stronger than we. And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land, which they had spied, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land, now watch this, that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are of great stature. Do you see what they did here? They don't get a reaction, so they change their story. That's exactly what they do. They change it from there are a few tall inhabitants here to all of the people are giants. Everyone. And yes, the land, forget this thing that we said about flowing with milk and honey. It devours the people. We can't go up. It will be a disaster. Pull back. We're going to crash. That's what they're saying. In fact, they take it up a notch in the next verse, in verse 33. Read this. There we saw giants, the descendants of Anak came from the giants. And we are like grasshoppers in their sight, so we were in their sight. See, so they're changing their story. When they didn't get what they wanted, they start changing their story. They start exaggerating. The long-necked people turn to giants. And the word for giant here is Nephilim. This word Nephilim comes from Genesis chapter 6. And it is a word it refers to fallen angels who tried to cohabit with human women and produced giants. Now you say, whoa, let me go back to Genesis 6. I never saw that. And then you'll go back to Genesis 6 and say, whoa, I never knew that was there. It's there. The problem is, the idea of what they were trying to do is they were trying to foil God's redemptive plan of Christ coming and dying on the cross and redeeming us of our sins. They thought if we can just intermingle angelic seed with human seed, we will foil God's plan. He can't save the world. That was their thought. That could not happen. You can't intermingle. Now, some teachers out there will try to say you can't do that. What was happening here is that these spies were pointing to that incident, using the word Nephilim, suggesting that these giants are not just long-necked people, descendants of Anak. They are some sort of superhuman race of demon-possessed animals that we have no chance to get. Do you see what they're doing? They're just building the story and building the story. And they will continue to use the word Nephilim throughout the Old Testament until we get to the book of Deuteronomy. And when we get to the book of Deuteronomy, if you know anything about the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, you know that Deuteronomy is kind of a recap where where Moses is about to send the children of Israel off under Joshua into the promised land, and he's recapping. Do you know what he does in Deuteronomy? When he talks about the giants, he does not use the word Nephilim. He uses the word Nephiim. So, well, what does that mean? It means a bunch of old, dead, powerless, tall people, giants. He goes back to define and actually correct what these spies were trying to report, calling them Raphaim instead of Nephilim. These 10 so-called leaders were scaring the people with delusional exaggeration to keep them from moving forward and enjoying the promised land. Does that sound familiar? Do you see that around you? They saw a problem. They scared the people. They stopped the progress. Look down in chapter 14, verse 1. So all of the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. All the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in the wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us select another leader and return to Egypt. Mission accomplished. Fear, panic. We can't do this. The people cry. They complain. They cower. From faith to fear. They are now defeated. Their spirit is gone. They begin blaming God. They begin blaming Moses. And they transition at that moment from mighty, victorious army led by God to whiny little victims that want to cower and turn and go back into slavery. That is what's happening. It's all right here. That's exactly what is happening. In the next few verses, these 10 so-called leaders will die. And their followers will suffer horrible loss. And they will waste their lives spending the next 40 years walking around in circles in the desert and dying themselves, accomplishing nothing. Because they had developed the habit of promoting fear over faith. That's what happens. And we see that happening over and over. That is what defeats us. Real leaders don't promote fear over faith. Real leaders don't panic. Real leaders don't ignore the problems, nor do they amplify the problems. Real leaders trust God and lead with bold faith. And in the case of Israel, there just happened to be 2 real leaders who will show us how to lead with bold faith. The names, you know, Joshua and Caleb. So let's look at how they turn things around. These 2 leaders will first of all show us how to lead with bold faith. Look down in back up at verse 13 and chapter 13, verse 30. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession, for we are able to overcome it. This Hebrew word for for quieted is one of those onomatopoeic words, a word that sounds like what it says. And so in the Hebrew, this word quieted is yahush. Get it? When I first read that, what they're trying to say is, y'all hush, you know. I don't know how he did that. I don't know whether he stood up on a platform and said, shh, hush, or whether he just went around to each one, shh, 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 no, don't panic, don't fear. But Caleb he's trying to quiet down their panic and their fears, and no. And as he tries to quiet the people, he turns around and he tries to challenge them with two realities. As he quiets them, he's trying to challenge them two different ways. As he is trying to lead them with bold faith, he's a leader, and leaders challenge us. So first of all, what he does is he challenges them to recapture the vision. Go back to the verse here, and what does he say here? He says, "Let us go up and take possession." Why did they leave Egypt? Why did they go to the promised land? What did Moses tell them? What kind of a vision did Moses cast in front of them? We must go to a land that flows with milk and honey that God is going to give us. It's not very far. It's an 11-day journey. Let's go. Let's possess the land. The buildings are already built. The vineyards are already there. Everything is ready for us. All we need to do is go in and possess the land. It's ready. We've been here for a year. We've been preparing. We're ready. Let's go. That's the vision. So the very first thing that Caleb does, as they have completely lost their vision, they're wondering, they're panicking, they're crying, they're failing, and he tries to take them back and say, whoa, let's go take the possession of the land. Recapture the vision. Put the vision back out there. Look at the vision. Don't look at the giants. Look at the vision. The second thing he tries to do is he challenges them to recover from victimization. He says, we are able to overcome. I think one of the major problems in our culture today is that we have developed the habit of being victims. We're looking at ourselves, we're whining, we're complaining, we're saying it's all over, we can't do it, we're victims, we may as well give up, go back, cower, go and forget what God is trying to do with us. In fact, in chapter 14, verse 4, just a little farther, they will admit it. They will say, you have brought us out here and our children and our wives are victims. No, that's not true. And so he's trying to get them to recover from victimization. Now here's the thing that they cannot see. Little do they know. Now they're afraid of the giants in the promised land. Little did they know that when they turn around and they go back into the desert, they begin going around in circles, they will face giants in the desert. Let's read. We go to Deuteronomy chapter 31, and we get introduced to someone. So we're doing a recap now in Deuteronomy. So I'm kind of jumping you back and forth because they connect. And Deuteronomy chapter 3 and verse number 11, Moses writes these words. Og, how'd you like to have that name? Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnants of the giants. And again, he uses the words Raphaim here, not Nephilim. Indeed, his bedstead was an iron bedstead, 9 cubits its length, 4 cubits its width. Let me put that, take it out of the Hebrew there. That's 13 feet long and 9 feet wide. His bed is the size of a medium small bedroom. So where was he? He was in Bashan. Where's Bashan? It's in the wilderness. They're going to have, and so, well, okay, what about this King Og business? We go back to Numbers chapter 21, and here's what happened. And they turned and they went by the way to Bashan. That's in the wilderness. So Og, king of Bashan, went out against them and all of his people. So they, that would be the children of Israel, defeated him, his sons, and all of his people until there was no survivor left. And watch this. And they took possession of his land. That became part of Israel. That's where Gad and the Reubenites were over in Israel. So they were afraid to go in to the giants. And so I guess God said, okay, you're going to have to get down in the wilderness and practice some giant killing and practice some taking some land so then we can get you back up here later on in life and help you to practice, to build your faith. They lacked faith. They had to be strengthened. They had to be strengthened in their faith by facing, fighting, and overcoming giant problems in their lives. Here's a lesson here. Giants don't go to what? They don't go away. If you try to retreat from giant problems, guess what? They follow you. They try to overcome you. We have to fight the giants. For 6 months, our leadership team and I have been trying to be voices of faith, trying to encourage our people. We have faced a giant here for years. We just don't have enough room. We'll fill the place up, we'll fill the parking place up, and then people get tired, and then we go back down. And so we are casting a vision before our church today to build some new facilities. Now that's a giant. It's really a giant when you consider that that costs have skyrocketed, materials are high, and laborers are few, and so what we're encouraging our people to do is to have faith to begin to raise money and to build facilities here at Community. And so for about 6 months, we've been talking to our people about it. And about 3 weeks ago, our people met together right here on a Sunday night and voted unanimously by faith to move forward and to take possession of the land that God's already given us, you know. And you say, but whoa. That means we've got to raise money, right? And the economy is going to blow. The inflation is very high. Yes, that's a giant that we have to face. And that's why God wants us to step out by faith. And these leaders, they speak out against, they speak out with both faith. Second thing they do is they show us how to speak out against fear. So Joshua, the son of Nun, I'm in chapter 14, verse 6. So Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephthah, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel. Now, the tearing of clothes is a violent reaction to a calamity or a catastrophic event. It was an expression of anguish, grief, heartbreak. Joshua and Caleb are devastated that the people of Israel are panicking in fear, and they're backing up, and they're trying to choose another leader, and they're trying to go back into slavery. They're devastated. For over a year now, they've been building to this climax. They're ready to go in, and the people are pulling back, and they tear their clothes in that violent expression. I want to fast forward 40 years from this event. I want to show you something that was happening that the children of Israel did not realize at this particular point. I want to go to Joshua. After the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, after all of these people that had wasted their life had died in the wilderness, then they're really ready to go in now. They've killed them some giants. They got some practice. They're ready to go. Joshua's the new leader. And they send spies into the land again. A recon mission. This time not 12, 2. And these two Israeli guys, meet someone just on the other side in the land of Canaan, a woman, and they're talking to her, and she's hiding them, And we're going to eavesdrop on the conversation right now. Are you ready? Here we go. Here's what the woman said. The terror of you has fallen on us, and all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea. For when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Do you see what's going on here? While the Israelites were panicked and trembling about the giants over here, the giants were panicked and trembling about the Israelites over there. They're afraid of each other. This was a time. Poor leaders try to control us with fear, panic, victimization, loss of vision. That's what poor leadership does. True leaders, dynamic leaders, like Joshua and Caleb, lead with bold faith to help us recover from victimization and recapture the vision so that we can move forward with progress in our life to victory rather than victimization. As we fear the giants of inflation, recession, deception, corruption, we must become the voices of faith. There are very few that are out there. We must speak out with our mission of drawing people to Christ, equipping them to reach others. We must recapture the vision of moving forward, seeing people trust Christ as their Savior, changing our community for the glory of God. We must have faith. We must be the voices of faith. Now, here's what's going to happen to our church. Today, by faith, we are launching a capital program to raise $400,000 cash. You say, that is fearful. That puts us in a panic. Well, it's kind of a small giant, okay? Once we do that, then we're going to do a bond issue to raise about $1 million more, so that we can move forward and begin to expand our facilities to accommodate our teens, our children, our adults. So as we've stepped out by faith, and we've done this, we've stepped out by faith. As we've stepped out by faith, God has responded in some spectacular and miraculous ways that I want to mention to you. I think it's a miracle that he called Kyle and Diana to be with Deanna. I didn't say that. Deanna to be with us. I mean, God moved in that for them to be here. They stepped out by faith. We stepped out by faith to lead our youth. This is part of the expansion project. We did not have anyone to move forward here. We were hoping back in January. We had a business meeting, and we were hoping for a $24,000 grant for our preschool that would help us move closer to the goal. We applied for the grant. It came back. Are you ready for this? Are you sitting down? For $120,000. I think that's of God. Just last week, we received $76,000 in stocks that we were able to liquidate and put over in our building fund. We've had about 9. So I mean, as we're being hit with this, we started adding it up, and with cash that's already been received and with promises that have already been made, we are setting somewhere at about $250,000 toward the $400,000 goal that we have made. I think God is opening things up for us right now. And what we must do is we've got to step forward in bold faith as we trust God to work with us in doing all of this. You know, we have the story about the giants here in the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy. 500 years later, after this scene, we find another giant. You've heard him in your Bible stories. His name was Goliath. Some 8 foot tall, probably 300 pounds. Had a spear that the shaft was like a 2x4. And once again, the children of Israel are standing in the valley of Elah. They're panicked. They don't know what to do. They can't move forward. And a little teenager, maybe 12, 13, 14 years old, comes stepping on the scene with bold faith, walks into the king's tent, and begins to employ this habit of speaking with a voice of bold faith, as opposed to developing the habit of cowering in fear. And he does these two things. Let me show you. Number one, he speaks out against fear. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 32, it says this: Then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail or fear because of him, the giant. Your servant will go out and fight with this Philistine. I'll do it, the little kid says. Then he speaks out. He says, don't be afraid. Calm down. Kahash. I'll do it. You won't do it? I'll do it. Then he speaks out against with bold faith. David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. I've tried to imagine this scene. And I imagine when he walked in and everybody's saying, you know, go back and take care of your sheep. This is a man's world here. We're going to stand up there. We're going to poke our chest out. We're going to try to scare that giant. I imagine what David did is he reached into his lion skin pouch. Maybe he had the mane around the top of it. And the first thing he does is he reaches in and he pulls out his bear claw necklace and puts it on. Then he reaches back in and he gets 5 smooth stones. Why 5? I'm counting giants. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One goes down, the next one's going to come. I've got to be ready. 5 stones, 5 giants. And he faces the giant with the power of God. And what happens? The enemy runs and they take possession of the land. Folks, that is the story of Christianity. That is the story of true leadership. That's how we move forward. We can't cower in fear. We can't panic. God has placed us here at this time to move forward because the victory is ours. We're not victims.
On behalf of Pastor Dan and the folks at Community, thank you for joining us today at Community On Demand. Feel free to share this link with others, and please know you are always welcome to be our guest during a live service any Sunday morning at our campus in the Woodlands, Texas. For more information, just click on the link www.cbcwoodlands.org. I hope you will again join us at Community On Demand.